Hey there, and welcome. So, Side Effects is holding a new Houdini art challenge called Mardini, which is starting on the 1st of March. The idea of it is to create an artwork in Houdini based on a daily prompt. That prompt is basically just a theme to base your artwork around. It's open to anyone who would like to enter, and if you do enter, it doesn't have to be every day. Last year, there were prizes for Best Daily, Best Weekly, Best Collection, Best Overall Artwork, and for entering every day. So, as you may know, I won Best Collection in last year's Who Lie Art Challenge, and I've decided to do a daily review video for each day's entries. I'm going to be talking about the winning entries, what makes them so good, and then I'm also going to be talking about some of the other entries. I'll go over what I like about them, what I think could maybe be changed, and how they could have been winning entries in my opinion. So if you'd like me to review your entry, feel free to tag me on Instagram at 9_between. So with all of that comes a bit of a disclaimer. Everything that I'm saying here is my own opinion. It doesn't make it right or wrong. I'm just trying to give a critique that the artist can work from and hopefully something that you can learn from as well. I'm not trying to make fun of or insult or belittle any of the artists. I'm merely just trying to give some feedback in an entertaining way. So let's get straight into it. In third place for day 12 Valley, we have this entry by Marius. And they've gone for somewhat of a fantasy scene. It almost has a mythological feel to it. So they have this character up front, mysterious hooded figure, staring at what we'd assume is the sun through this valley. And the interesting thing is this isn't the sun because it's nighttime. There's a weird element to this image. But the main thing that makes it interesting is that this does take place in a valley and it is focused on this center point. So they've ticked the box of it being a valley, but they haven't put all of the emphasis on the valley itself. They've put a lot of emphasis on these extra elements towards the center, and this makes it a lot more interesting than if they had just focused on the valley. So once again, a variation in lighting is always welcome. They have this sort of yellow-orange light over here being cast by this sphere. They also have the more blue ambient light being cast over here, and this gives a very strong contrast. They have shallow depth of field and a lot of other interesting elements, such as these streaks over here. I'm not actually sure what that's caused by, but it is quite a nice touch. They have some stars in the background, a little bit of water to hit some reflections with. Overall, very interesting entry to look at. They've gone for a fair amount of detail. I think that this is a cool entry. So yeah, that's from Marius. In second place, we have this entry by Ben CZE, and what he's gone for is a valley, right? He's gone for a more literal take on this. This is just a valley as opposed to some other elements to add interest. But what he's done is he's created a very detailed valley. So he has these sort of cracks over here. You can see that there's the sort of lighter stone color showing through. And then he has these pools of water. It's quite interesting because the pooling that he has actually does follow the geometry. So this isn't just a grid of some sort. I think, as far as I can tell, he used the terrain tools, did actual sort of precipitation, erosion, and then used that to drive a sort of reflective material that he used as water. That's just how I imagine it's done. I might be wrong. The composition of this is very nice. They have sort of winding to the side over there, with the focal point being the sort of center of the valley. They've also once again gone for an interesting light source. It's not just a single flat light source. You can see that this light is hitting this rock face over here coming from this side. This side over here is more dark, but there's still ambient light. So overall, quite an interesting shot. A very literal take on the topic of valley, but very well executed. So great entry from Ben CZE. And in first place, we have this entry from Edgar Homt. I hope that I said that right. They've gone for a much more fertile valley, the sort of greenery in it, and they've also gone for a very different art style. So first and foremost, if you are going for this art style, you should do exactly what they've done here and add a lot of detail to the scene. Because you're not going for realism, you should at least have some interesting elements to it. So they have these clouds in the top, no volumetrics of any sort. This just seems to be geometry. Then in the foreground, they have this wheelbarrow that's being overgrown by these plants over here. They have varying orientations of these plants. They're not just instanced sort of in a grid or just lining up. it's a very natural formation over here. They also have this dip over here. So they have a foreground and a middle ground. It's a very nice touch to add because it gives you varying depth. And when you do that, it also adds interest because of those depths. So they also have these fields and they have very natural formations. Everything about this is great. They've also gone for a lighting that is closer to golden hour. So that is an hour before sunset or an hour after sunrise. That gives you this more orange light. And over here, they just have this wonderful light hitting the edges of these plants. Overall, this is a beautiful entry. It's very nice to look at. It's got a good feel to it. They've gone for this more simplified style, but they've executed it perfectly. So awesome, awesome entry by Edgar Hunt. In third place in the animation category, we have this entry by Jay-Z Roller. And this is so cool. It's an awesome entry. I mean, this is insanely good. I can't imagine how the first and second place entries can get much better than this. They've got a completely unique concept, right? They have this creature that sort of creates a valley as he walks, and it's just such a good setup. Yeah, this is awesome. I don't have anything bad to say about it. The interaction with the ground and the rocks, the lighting, the style, the feel, the character that it has. Now, everything about it is awesome. Don't have anything bad to say about this at all. Awesome entry by Jay-Z Roller. In second place, we have this entry by Spiderweb FX. And they've gone for this Burning Valley. And so they have a lot of interesting elements to this. Firstly, the actual scene opens with a foreground shot. So usually you'll notice this in an establishing shot for a terrain when they want to show the expanse of the terrain, sort of how menacing it could be or how expansive it is. They'll do this where they start with a foreground which sort of blocks off the main shot. So as you can see, it's sort of contained into this small area. You only get a small glimpse of what's happening in this area over here. They then expand upon it as it plays back, and then you get to see the full valley. And so this is where you get to feel the size of the terrain and you get to see the extent of the terrain. You can see that it goes off into the background and it just feels like it doesn't end. So they've done an awesome job at creating this terrain that feels dangerous and somewhat unstable. They've got all of these sharp edges and their texturing is great. They have this orange on all of these sharp edges and this black. They also have some very simple simulations running over this. So you can see there's some pyro over there, some pyro over there. They've got particulate matter in the air that makes this feel like a sort of volcano or something like brimstone. And they've got this very subtle volumetric movement going on. So all of this sort of pushing towards the camera. Awesome stuff. I don't know how they manage this. Actually, the sort of smoke pushing towards the camera. Yeah, if this was rendered and composited in cops, I think it's awesome. Because they do have the sort of displacement even on this smoke. You can see that it displaces those background rocks. So overall, this is awesome. There's a great level of detail. So yeah, awesome entry by Spiderweb FX. And in first place, we have this entry by Al Cantola. And they have this blimp dropping this rope into Glen Canyon. So I imagine that they took the actual topographical map and sort of applied it into a Houdini terrain. But they've got an awesome level of detail in this opening shot. So you can see that there's variation in color. There's these sort of streams over here. They've got the peaks and the low-lying areas. Everything about this looks great. They have a very good lighting setup, once again leaning towards more of a golden hour type lighting, where they just have it hitting these edges with a very orange light. Over here, it sort of evolves. So it changes as you zoom out. As you can see, this over here isn't the same as when you're viewing it from here. They have this evolution as it goes from a real terrain, which is pretty interesting, to a map, right? So this is going from a terrain to a map. And that's an interesting transition that you'll also see a lot in movies. They'll show either a map and then they'll zoom in and it will become real terrain, or they'll show real terrain and they'll zoom out and it will show a map. So this is a very interesting take on that. It's a very subtle nod to that style that's often seen in film. And overall, I think it's very interesting. So a great entry by Alcantola. Time for Mardini review.
Wait! Oh my god, here!
Yeah, this entry by the Hassan, it's actually based on a real thing. Like, this isn't just a rock that's decided to, you know, take a walk. like, I think they called sliding rocks, something like that. But they appear in Death Valley. So they sort of slide along the ground and leave these trails. I read about this when I was a kid, so I don't know if they actually discovered what causes this, because I think when I was a kid, this was like a mystery. I actually want to see. Okay. Rocks move when large ice sheets a few millimeters thick floating in an ephemeral winter pond start to break up during sunny day. These thin floating ice panels frozen during cold winter nights are driven by light winds and shove rocks up to 5 meters a minute. Basically, it's magic. It's magic. It's rocks. It's magical rocks. So yeah, that's what this is. It's pretty cool. This entry by Resilient Picture Company. Sorry, I added motion in there for some reason. Resilient Picture Company. So this is a great setup, right? However, there's a few things that are somewhat problematic here. And actually, no, it's just basically one thing. It's these stretch textures over here. And this pretty much always happens when you're working with terrains. The way that you get around this is by doing triplanar projection. So the way it works is, say you have, oh, I can do my fancy thing now. Say you have a mound and you project UVs down and just project a grid, right? So if there's a sort of grid, just like this, it projects it down onto the surface. So now your grid is sort of like this, right? It kind of follows the surface and that's your grid. That's fine, you don't really have any stretched UVs. However, if you do this and you have a sort of harsh drop-off like that, and then you try projecting that grid, so you have this being projected onto this, then you might have something like this, where it reaches this edge, right? So it's fine until here, this is all good. But then over here, this entire face has a stretched edge. Right, this edge over here gets stretched because this little piece that's being projected gets projected onto that entire face. So what happens is when you use that to apply textures, so say you have your grid and you apply a texture here, that gets stretched along the entire front face. And that's a problem. So the way you fix that is by projecting from different angles. You project from the top, you project from the front, and all these different directions. And there's a couple of ways of doing that, but the easiest way is inside of Mantra. There's actually a node that you can use called triplanar project or something. If you're not using Mantra, I think the workaround is just a UV auto seams, if I'm not mistaken, but it also depends on the size of your geometry. What I would suggest is taking that piece of terrain, partly reducing it so you have less geometry to work with, and then doing a UV auto seams and then transferring the attributes. That can kind of fix the issue. There are more elaborate ways of doing triplanar projection, and you would usually do that if you're doing like a proper terrain. In a daily challenge, the best way might be to just partly reduce your terrain geometry, do a UV auto seams with a UV flatten and a UV, what is it called? UV layout? Yeah. And then just transfer the UV attribute back onto the higher res geometry, and that will probably fix the sort of stretching over here. But yeah, even the stretching is not so bad. It's just this area over here. Otherwise, cool entry. So I really like the trees. These are nice trees. Good trees, man. I think the other thing is maybe change the direction of your light source. When it comes from this side, you're getting a lot of your focus being drawn to this area, which isn't the best looking area of the shot. I think that this area over here is the best looking area of the shot. So maybe make your light source coming in from this side rather, so that it hits this face over here. Less light ends up over there, and more light ends up all over these trees. Then I think it would look a bit better. But yeah, it's a cool entry. Like, there's a lot of detail to this, so I think it's nice. So this one over here, I've actually done something similar. So I'll show you mine after this. I'll go find it. But I think variation on this is important. So because you have a small scene, I think it's important to do variation. Also, this cloud, I think maybe cut the cloud off. So there are actually cloud tools in Houdini. I think it's just called like cloud. And there's an option to flatten base. And that's a very nice option when you're trying to do this sort of zoomed out version where you can see an entire cloud. I think you should do the flatten base thing on clouds. Other than that, I think just variation in the actual scene over here, maybe some trees and things. They don't even have to be very high resolution. That's the thing about detail, right? From a distance, you get the idea of the detail, but when you zoom in, you realize that it's not very good quality. But that's the point, right? So if you just make super low poly trees everywhere, then on first impression, you're like, whoa, that's cool. And you zoom in and you're like, oh, the trees are kind of low res. But you've already had that initial sort of visceral, whoa, that's cool. And that's the important part. So I want to show you mine. Obviously, I didn't do mine in a day, so it's not really fair drawing comparisons. But this over here. So I just had all of these trees over here. Once again, these are super low res trees. They're basically just kind of spheres. But I made a tutorial series on my Patreon about how to do this. And yeah, that's what I meant about flattening the base of the cloud. I think it's important when you're sort of at this zoomed out scale. But yeah, so this was something I did a while ago. But this is what I mean about variation. You just do a lot of variation, and it's cheap variation. You can even do like bump maps and displacement on rocks and things. And yeah, you get away with a very good looking render that sort of fakes a lot of the detail. I rendered this before I had Redshift, so this took ages because it was rendered in Mantra. So yeah, you know, like I think you just spruce this up a little and it's an awesome entry. What are these coordinates? Monolith. Hello? What am I looking at? Why is there just a monolith? What is this? Utah monolith. Spooky. Hectic. Freaky stuff. I mean, some guy probably just put it there, but do you know something, Seth? Is there something we should know? Oh wow, this is very nice. From Takuya Okada. The only thing is, I'd say some more variation in these sort of trees or bushes, but I think this looks awesome. But yeah, once again, there's this texture stretching. It's such an issue. Like, I had an issue with this for a long time when making terrains, and you have to triplanar project. It's like the only way to get rid of that. But yeah, so I think that this is cool. I like the feel of it, the sort of volumetrics in the atmosphere, all very nice. Ooh, this one from Ash Effects is nice. I like the moon. I always think it's cool when you do something different. Like, this is a focus on lighting. So you can imagine this as like a lighting R&D type thing. I think it's very cool having the lighting over here, sort of getting this little bit of edge detail, only focusing basically on form. They still have textures and stuff. They just don't have it with color. There's no like diffuse color attached to it. So I like this approach. I really like this entry. Another nice entry. I think it's cool as well. Good shape, good lighting, interesting texturing. Cool, man. Oh, it's back. Every single time. Ah, my favorite character. God, it's so disturbing. It's a cool idea though. I appreciate the idea behind this. Another good entry. Like, there's a lot of good attempts at making terrains. Terrains are tricky to do in a short period of time. Like, no two ways about it. Making like a fully realized terrain takes long. You have to make each element, and then you have to instance the elements, but then you have to make sure the texturing's good, and the lighting's good, and the scale looks right, and I don't miss doing terrains. This is very nice. I think that this is a special mention entry. I actually haven't been doing one for like stills, but I think that if there was a still special mention, what did I just say? But if there was a still special mention entry, it would be this one, because of the variation in lighting. Not so much the actual terrain, although the actual terrain has a lot of good detail to it. I think that the lighting in this is awesome. So they have this sort of single light hitting all of these edges over here, bringing the focus to the center area, which is good. This is where you want your focus to be. Then they have the sort of volumetric fog towards the back. Aerial perspective sort of fades off into the distance. Looks very good. So yeah, I like this entry a lot. This is from Adrian Lambert. I think a special mention entry for today. This one from Nice Take is a nice take on the topic, because this sort of movement is very satisfying. It's a very fluid camera movement. They have a nice little bit of detail. If this was fully fleshed out, man, this could be such a nice shot. There'd be so many interesting things to look at, you know, little rocks and some shrubs. And yeah, I think that this is awesome. They have even that little detail over there. Man, I think this is cool. Is this thing actually emitting light though? I can't tell. I think it would be cool if it was emitting light onto this sort of valley, and maybe this was a bit brighter so that it actually lit up the valley and everything else was a bit darker, so you can only see where this thing's guiding you. I think that would be pretty cool. But yeah, nice entry from Nice Take. Sorry, it's just nice. Another awesome entry from Disturber. They've got a great level of detail, and that's what I was talking about, like just having lots of little low poly elements to make up the detail in your shots. I think that this is cool. The thing that's maybe missing from this is a light source to add interest. So maybe do like the moon over there. You don't even have to have it in shot, but just sort of moonlight hitting this entire strip. That's just an idea, but I think that the lighting on this just kind of doesn't have a focal point. And this goes back to the idea that if you don't have anything to look at in particular, then the whole shot has to look amazing. That's just sort of an idea that I've kind of discovered over time, that if you don't have a focal point, everything better be the focal point. So I think a good lighting setup would help this a lot. There is nice lighting, but I'd consider this just ambient. I think a single focal point, like a spotlight, would help this a bit. I always think that it's kind of risky doing particles because of compression. Actually, that's one of the big reasons. Like over here, there's so much noise that your eye just doesn't agree with it. But that's compression. There's nothing you can really do about that if you're putting it up on like YouTube or Vimeo. Yeah, when it actually reaches this part, I think that this looks quite nice. It's just that initial part is a little bit difficult to look at because of compression, but I think it's a cool entry. So yeah, Brandon McFarland, nice entry. That is all for today. I have some videos to catch up on, so I'm trying to keep these a bit more brief, even though I still spent like an hour busy recording this one. So yeah, I'm gonna move on to the next day. So I will see you tomorrow with whatever tomorrow is. Bye.